Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening everyone. Welcome back to my YouTube channel and to another installment in the Copper and Woodchute Mountain Railroad. If you're watching last week, you will have seen me build station platforms for both Lackonia and Copper Junction. In this week's video I will take care of the roads and the sculptor mold. It's a slightly longer video than most of those in this series, so I'm just going to get on with it without any further talking. Hope you enjoy the show.
Well, earlier this afternoon I finished colouring the rocks. The last area I did was on the drop flap. For the rest of the afternoon I want to start on the roads. There's one going across here and another one over this side of the railroad with grade crossings on both the narrow and standard gauges. I think I'm going to build a wood plank crossing for the standard gauge, whereas the narrow gauge ones are just going to be all dirt. For the base layer, I'm just using spackle compound. The only tools I need are drywall knives. It's fairly straightforward. I'm just going to shape the road roughly today, and then I'll come back out tomorrow and finish the job. Well, that's about all I can do for now. Here is the main road over both the standard and narrow gauges. I have attempted to roughly shape a crown in the road because the larger the scale, the more noticeable that is. Here's the other road, the other side of the railroad. This little area off to the side is a driveway. I've put a bit of spackle in there because I don't want it to be dead flat. That's just an experiment. I'm not sure whether I'm going to do all the rest of the driveways that way or not. All I can really do now is leave the workshop, let it set, and come back out again tomorrow and do a bit more shaping. I'll probably have to do quite a bit of sanding as well as add more spackle in the low spots. And I will also take care of the flangeways tomorrow. It's been a few days since I've been out here because the spackle on the roads was very thick. But I've now come back out. I've trimmed the excess off the edges. I've also made sure that the flangeways are clear. I've done that first by carefully cutting with a knife and then running the NMRI gauge through there just to clear out any debris. This end measures the flangeways. I just run them through there. And since I'm no longer scraping anything, I know that is theoretically a big enough flangeway. I've also filled the worst of the holes in the roads. They don't need to be perfect, but I want them reasonably okay. There's that one. And this one over here. That was a lot closer. I think this one was better because it wasn't as thick. Well, that is the wood grade crossing done. It only took a few minutes. I don't have an O scale NMRA flange gauge, so I had to use the box car that the client provided as a gauge. I measured the back to back, made sure the wood was about 0.5 millimeter narrower. I've also chamfered the corners on the outside of the curve, so there's a bit of a lead in. And this basswood that I'm using is slightly lower than the rail. I did put spacers in of thin card in 4 places, and I used a gap filling adhesive to glue it down. So it's now slightly below rail level, but not by very much. I'm just going to weight that, call it done, and get on with something else. Well, I've just cleaned up all the extra spackle that I put on the grade crossings yesterday. There is one more imperfection just here, but I'm going to leave that. I'm going to finish it as a pothole. It's fairly circular and about a scale 18 inches diameter. So I think that'll be a nice addition to the road. As you can see, there is a locomotive on the track. I've taken the opportunity to test everything, making sure that I can run through all routes on the grade crossings without any hesitation. Making sure, of course, I use a short wheelbase locomotive with limited pickups. That way it'll warn me if the flangeways are not deep enough and it's being lifted off the rails. Both those 2 routes and the 3 over this side are working properly, no hesitation. And I already tested the standard gauge grade crossing with the box car yesterday. So I'm going to call those grade crossings done. Also, I sent the customer pictures of the finished passenger platform at Lackonia, and he liked it. So that job can also be considered done. So next I'm going to get on with something else. As a preliminary step towards getting the parking lot for the Lackonia depot at the right height, figuring where it needs to go, I've put the other two structures in their approximate locations. I think here I'm going to cut down the fascia. Instead of having it slightly higher, I'm going to make it slightly lower. So I'll cut that down, probably even shave the plywood a little bit along that edge, just so it's not perfectly flat. With Molly's tack and feed at the back, there is a bit of a height discrepancy with the loading dock versus the car floor. But I don't think I'm going to raise the building. I think it looks good the height it is, and the client built it the way he wanted it. Rather than raise it up higher, I think I'm just going to accept the fact that the loading dock is a little on the low side, and there's no reason why that couldn't be the case in reality. I once worked at a joinery store that would regularly receive shipping containers, and the loading dock there was so low that we had to get a portable forklift ramp to unload the containers. So I think that's all the justification I need to leave the building the height it is. It's taken me a bit longer to get to this point to make the next clip than I expected, because we had a power failure earlier. The power was out for a couple of hours. So I went inside, used the generator on my computer, and worked on a layout design. I've now remasked all the track because I want to start working on the sculptor mold. I've also put in the base for the structure that's going to go here that we don't have yet, because I didn't want the step in the middle of the foundation. So now I'll just put a thin layer of dirt over there, and the client will be able to get the structure that he hasn't built yet to fit neatly. I was just about to get the sculptor mold out when I remembered one more thing I want to take care of, one more thing I want to do first. I want to back the bolts out between the benchwork sections here and over here. I want to separate the sections and then put in strips of plastic bag before I bolt them back together again, because I don't want to risk scenic cement running down between the benchwork sections by capillary action and gluing the sections together. So I'm going to take some time out and do that, and I'll be right back. Here is the completed base for the small freight house that goes between the two tracks at this point. I left the glue drying overnight with bricks on it. I just sanded it smooth this morning. I wanted to make sure there was no ridge along there, because that would show through the dirt. The goal for this morning is to get the sculptor mold on everything. I've already applied the first batch. I started in the area of the culverts. This fill for the mine spur is a little messy right now. I can't shape it properly, because if I put any pressure at all on that, it will just fall straight through. There is no backing. So that first coat now forms the backing for a second coat that I will put once it's had a couple of hours to dry. By the time I finish the sculptor mold everywhere else, that will be set enough that it will be able to hold another surface coat. I have my second batch already mixed and ready to go. Let's head over to my bench. It's just a simple mix of sculptor mold, paint and water. I start by mixing the water and the paint in the bottom of the bucket, and then I add the sculptor mold, stirring with a strip of plywood. This is about a 1-inch square stick. I'm not trying to make big batches, because the bigger the batch, the more chance it is of going lumpy. It's much easier to do a lot of small batches than a few big ones. There's no hard and fast formula. I'm using about 3/4 cup of paint, 2 cups of water, and then just 2 big handfuls of sculptor mold. The resulting mix needs to be fairly goopy, with maybe just a little bit of extra moisture. It will dry very quickly, and you don't want to end up with it getting unworkable before you've finished. Well, that is 5 batches of sculptor mold. I've done everything from the door through the town of Lackonia as far as about here. By the time I had done 4 batches, I was able to come back and finish up this dirt fill because the first batch had set enough. I've put a thin, uneven screed in this parking lot area because I don't want it to be completely flat. Basically doing the same with the sculptor mold as I did with the spackle over the other side. That will then get a thin covering of sifted dirt to give it a cleared lot appearance, but with just enough imperfection to make it look believable. Well, this is 11 batches. I have finished the Lackonia side, got round the end, and I've gone most of the way along the back, along the Copper Junction side. Well, the back and middle. I haven't done any of the front on this side yet. I think I mentioned just now that's 11 batches. I'm going to go in, sit down for a bit, take some lunch, and I will come back out and continue this afternoon. Well, I've had a nice long lunch break. I'm now back out here again this afternoon, and I plan to get all the sculptor mold finished. I'm going to continue in this corner, get that area done as it leads into the staging, then work my way back along the front, back to the engine house, and then I'm going to jump around to this area here. At the start of the staging yard and on the drop flap. And I've just realized there is a little bit in here that I haven't done yet. Well, batch number 14 finished the front area in front of Copper Junction and actually got most of this area done as well on the drop flap. I would have got even closer, but it started to dry too quickly. It caught up on me and I had to throw away a little bit at the end. Everywhere now is just thin screeds, so I'm going to mix up a much smaller batch this time because there's no sense in wasting it. I don't know whether I'll be able to finish it with one more small batch, but the critical factor at this point is the amount of working time I have rather than how big a batch I can make. Well, that is all the sculptor mold finished. That last small batch was just about enough to get this area done. After I cleaned up the tools, I realized that I didn't get any in here, but that doesn't really matter. I can build it up with dirt. I'll just pan around everywhere. First I'll go around the outside, and then I'll have a look inside. And then I'll show you inside. You may notice how I have covered every square inch of the bare foam. Although the primary reason for the sculptor mold is to make sure all the contours are right, get the final shape right, I do want to make sure I cover the foam completely for 2 reasons. Firstly, the sculptor mold sticks to the foam better than anything else will. And secondly, it means that if there's a gap in the ground cover, I already have an acceptable base color. Let's just duck under quickly. Now I'll pan around the inside. This is what the viewer will see. And that is everything. I'm going to go inside now. I'm going to let that set. And I'll come back out again tomorrow and get on with the next step.
Well, that's all for this week. Hope you enjoyed this video, found it useful or interesting or both, and I hope to see you back next week. I don't quite remember what that one's all about, but I'm sure it'll be a lot of fun. In the meantime, thanks for watching, and bye for now.